Welcome back here at Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about the 2022 midterm elections. I was intending to do a more interesting video this week, but I figured for the sake of posterity, we will Olympic dive into the great morass. Previously, I attempted to warn people that this sort of outcome might indeed materialize, but they were understandably resistant because if you are engaged in a somewhat algorithm-fueled regimen of, "Hello everyone, it's Developmental New Freedom Radio, I hope you're doing well. All right, everyone, another instance of Beijing Biden's corruption. And times the liberal left. Well, imagine my shock. I agree with that. There's going to be a tendency to develop in this echo chamber. It is an echo chamber. It's a smaller one than the normies are in, and we'll have to break that down in future. But ostensibly, you come across this premature triumphalism, especially around elections. And you can't understand why things aren't playing out exactly as Zero Hedge says, or exactly as these talking heads claim it will. So it leads to more rage pilling, and honestly, much of this, you can try to blame voter fraud, and there might be some legitimacy to that, although still we haven't seen the smoking gun, so to speak. A lot of what has happened in this election can be explained in a fairly rational and less sinister manner. So let's break it down slowly across various fronts. To begin with, the GOP has struggled with selecting quality candidates since at least 2010. If you remember, they could have won with Mike Castle by 20 points in Delaware, but they said he's not a true conservative, so they chose the candidate that lost by almost 20 points, Christine O'Donnell. John Raisy in West Virginia, Ken Buck in Colorado, of course, Sharon Angle in Nevada. That should have been a pickup, but they decided to select the nutcase to run against Harry Reid instead of the other fairly conservative candidates. 2012, Murdoch and also Todd Akin were not helpful. With 2022, you see this playing out. Now, we might say that Mastriano and Bolduc are based, which they kind of are, but not good fits for Pennsylvania or New Hampshire. You need someone who's electable. In New Hampshire, if they had chosen Chris Sununu, who was going to run, but then, as I said before, he realized the Republicans don't want to do anything. You just want to be against everything. So if he had run, he would have slaughtered Maggie Hassan. And he's a fairly conservative guy in his own way. Not perfect, but at a certain point you have to say, would you rather be with a senator who you agree with on 80% than one that you disagree with on the same percent? It is very much a confounding situation. So Pennsylvania was unfortunate, but really not hard to predict. And because I'm fairly realist, even when I see stuff like, oh, the poll in Washington says she's ahead by a percentage point, or Lee Zeldin's ahead by a percentage point, I don't read much into it because you know that the registration advantage in the voting history holds. It is highly unlikely there will be an upset. Much like the clowns last year saying that Larry Elder was going to win in California. I knew he was going to lose from the beginning. It was just the typical, oh yeah, it'll happen because you just believe it enough. No, let's come back down to reality for a moment so we don't set ourselves up for dismay. Alaska, which I think is going to head in favor of Murkowski because of the voting system. Chewbacca, I didn't follow it much. She seemed to be somewhat intelligent, although it's funny, if you look at a picture of her with her kids, you think she has 5 different baby daddies. So is that disqualifying? I mean, not necessarily, I suppose. This is politics, so it's a game of diminishing returns, as we might say. One area where I am willing to entertain possible voter fraud would be the Pennsylvania Senate race. Now, Oz outperformed Mastriano, but somehow Fetterman won. And Fetterman is like the biggest astroturfed fraud I can imagine. He's not a steelworker union guy like he tries to present himself. He was a 6'5" numbers droid who studied finance and then public policy at Harvard. And he was just put up there. He has a stroke. He's obviously not mentally well, but I guess it doesn't matter. Wife is hot, though. Although, again, you're looking at Oz, he seems like an outsider. I don't know why Trump endorsed him. There must have been someone who would have been better to run. You can find some state senator, whatever, who's fairly conservative but has a somewhat clean background, and you'll be in better position than running a person who is always going to have, like, what are you doing here? You seem like a carpetbagger. Nevertheless, I find it hard to believe after all the stuff that was being shown unless that wasn't being shown on local TV in Pennsylvania, they would still vote for the guy, unless they're all disabled in Pennsylvania. I don't know. As it stands right now, Blake Masters probably will lose. I'm not sure how the remaining ballots are going to fall. He didn't help himself when he went around claiming he wanted to privatize Social Security. Arizona has a lot of retirees. And you might even explain that election and perhaps the prior one with McSally that you've got New Mexico and California nearby. How hard would it be for them to just hire young liberals to work like custodial jobs or freaking field directors, have them get residency after 6 or 7 months in time and vote in an election? I mean, it's legal. A lot of these states, they have no quality control because you can jack up California, the laboratory of democracy model. You jack up California and then you move out to North Carolina and vote Democrat. There's nothing preventing you from doing that because these states, oh, well, we welcome people, we welcome business. So that model is obviously a problem, and we'll be talking about that with abortion later on in the video. J.D. Vance, at least he was successful, so give him credit for that. I'm still a little bit, I question him because he was very much shilling for Obama like a globalist prior to the rise of Trump. He was actually attacking Trump at one point, so we'll see how he's going to be. Is he really going to be America first, or is he going to be a Silicon Valley venture capitalist first? And this brings us to the sad tale of Herschel Walker. Now, when I saw that this guy was running and the GOP was actually backing him, I figured this is another in the long line since 2009 of the Republicans trying to prove that they're actually the party for black people. But not even in a genuine way. It's always this kind of really insincere attempt. Because you have a guy who used to be an NFL player, so logic holds he's probably banged a lot of women, and he's probably, unless he was very good at using Johnnies, he probably has procured an abortion or two. He's probably had to get rid of some toxic relationships to protect his money and to protect his status. So is it really surprising he's going to have a bunch of skeleton closets? Is that exactly, oh my God, it's just a liberal smear? I don't believe it's a liberal smear, because if you understand what the professional sports world is like, it's fairly, frankly, something you should expect. So he gets in there, and just looking at his son, when I saw a video of his son back early in 2022, and I'm going, okay, so this is the son you didn't raise, who is like a Chadrone-like power bottom ballet dancer, and you still don't feel a sense of shame in trying to come out as a candidate for Senate. I mean, that just speaks volumes, and it's not good, I should note. This is a big problem because they think, oh, okay, black conservative in a state that's like 60% Caucasian, usually votes Republican, and there's 30% black, so he will do well. Well, that's not really the outcome, and it's interesting here, by the way. Comp, the incumbent governor, beat the Dunkin' Donuts security guard by 7 or so points. And with that, you'd assume, okay, Herschel would probably win pretty close to that, but he vastly underperformed, unless you're ascribing it to voter fraud. But it's not like Kemp, you could claim he's a WEF, oh, he's controlled by the elite, but he's fairly conservative. He signed election integrity legislation. He expanded the Second Amendment. He's not a John McCain shill through and through. And let's look at these numbers for a second with the exit polls. I know they're not perfectly scientific, but they still give us a sense of how things play out. So for Comp, he gets 58% of the male vote and actually 48% of the female vote, which is surprising. He gets, with the Caucasians, 74%, she gets 25%. She gets 90% of the black vote, and he gets 9%. And then he gets 43% of the Latino vote, 46% of the Asian vote. Overall, he gets 74%, and she has 25% of the white vote, 79% for her of the non-whites. All right. So this is a pretty strong defeat. If we want to ascribe voter fraud, but why wouldn't they let Abrams come into power? Unless the idea is secretly we are seeing a resurgence of the Karl Rove neocons, and they're going to control the entire country. So this is just a blip to get rid of the MAGA Trumpers. Okay, maybe. What complicates this, now this is Herschel Walker versus Warnock, okay? He wins less of the male vote, if you can believe it. And he actually wins less of the female vote as well, which is quite interesting. He wins less of the Caucasian vote. He actually wins, and I know these are not perfectly scientific, but he actually wins less of the black vote. This is pretty sad. All the millions of dollars spent promoting Blexit, Kendachi Owens, all this massive campaign, First Step Act, Platinum Plan, and it's not really paying off for Republicans. Even when you have a black conservative in a state with 30% black population, he should have taken at least 25% of the black vote. Doesn't seem to have happened. In fact, one article I saw suggested that Warnock had gotten more of older white votes. Now, is it because of racism? Well, Warnock is also black. You could say that maybe the KKK voted for Chase Oliver, the gay libertarian, maybe. But it's just not very convincing. And I think it might be because either people don't like Walker's policies or they don't like him as a person because they think he's a reprobate and a scumbag. That doesn't mean that Warnock is a good guy. We know he has domestic violence in his past, but it just goes to show you picking a candidate largely because, oh, he's got some fame and he's black might not be the best idea. You could find a black person that has more of an integritous background and they probably would easily beat someone like Warnock. Again, assuming it's not voter fraud, but just constantly claiming voter fraud because you have a bad candidate is in of itself not terribly persuasive unless the fraud is so abundantly obvious. And so final numbers for White, he gets 70%, so that's less than in comp, and then Warnock actually did better with non-whites than Stacey Abrams, which is a little bit informative as well. So finally we get to the other subject, and that would be this normie wall that a lot of people don't really want to acknowledge in the conservative, or they don't really understand. Because we hear a lot about, oh, the normies are getting red-pilled, they're getting red-pilled. They're waking up. And it's like, yeah, you have, I don't know, let's say a Tyrone is sitting there and he's waking up. Oh, he's waking up to the fact that the dildo came out of his ass. He has to put it back in. No, I'm just saying, that's how you have to look at a lot of this stuff. People will actually try to make themselves, they'll stay in a subservient position, right? Like they don't want to escape and see the light. They would rather just be in that, because psychologically it's comforting. I work my job, do my 401k, I go out on the weekends. We're all Americans, it's okay, Biden's taking care of stuff. Let's look at some overall exit polls for the election. And this is going to tell us a lot of stuff. Again, they're not perfectly scientific, but it's what we're going to go on to get an idea. Now, these both for age, they have just different ranges. 18 to 29 is heavily Democrat, unsurprisingly. 30 to 44 is also majority Democrat. A little bit shocking, and you see it broken down here. 25 to 29, very Democrat. Then more Democrat than any other group, 54%, 30 to 39. I'd expect this to be higher Republican, honestly. Now, even the older folks, you would think more GOP votes, but really, I've seen some elections where they are over 60%, so that is very telling. Either it's because of the Social Security scare stuff, or maybe the older people are like, we don't like that election denialism, lol.com. Who can say? Marital status, 58% married Republican, 59% non-married Democrats. Apparently there are people who say that the economy is doing good. No one say it's excellent, though. Okay, we can restore faith in humanity, I suppose. Race, very important here. 58% Caucasian, 40% to the Democratic side. And then for blacks, 86% Democrat, 13% Republican. 13% Republican. Again, after all those efforts they made, you get 13% of the vote in this year with the inflation, all these problems. Honestly, Republicans should just stop even talking about black people in the way they do. The type of black people that are going to vote for you are the ones who are already going to be somewhat, outsiders from their community, or like they think differently than others. Stop trying to go for those. Look at these other Latino, 39%, Asian, 40%. You have a much better chance of winning votes by focusing on these groups than, like, this is all the money you spent and you got 13%. With all the bad stuff going on, all the obvious examples of condescension and racism towards blacks by Democrats, and you're getting 13% of the vote. Give it up. Fold, stop trying to sacrifice yourself on the platter of, oh yeah, we're going to be the non-racist party. It's just embarrassing. Gender, Republicans won 56% of men, obviously. Democrats only 53% of women, but who knows? Maybe they're trans women. The way it is nowadays. I was expecting this to be much higher female overall. Abortion should be legal in all cases. 86% of Republicans or Democrats say that. That's 29% of respondents. That is kind of sick, but not really surprising either. Married with children, no is split even. That's also kind of surprising. You expect this to be, well, I guess this would be much higher. So it's interesting that that's split. Abortion should be legal, 73% of Democrats, 60% of overall respondents. Gender by marital status. Okay, married men 59, married women 56, unmarried men 52, but very high unmarried men. You'd think this would be a little bit more like only 30%. And then unmarried women, of course, 68%. So now we've had the seething and the coping about taking away women's rights, but it's not like these folks are actually going to go ahead and do it, like most of the other schemes they come up with. But, you ask yourself, what's going on here exactly? Well, I'll do a quick aside, just to say by race. White men 63, white women 53, black men 17, so a little bit higher. But black men still 82% Democrat, black women 88% Democrat, 10% Republican, Latino men 45%. Seems like you have your best shot at Latino men getting that over 50% in future. And Latinas, maybe if, marry them, give them a few kids, I guess they become more conservative. But the real story of this election is the normie wall, the normie coalition. Because a lot of Republicans, if you notice, talking about this red wave, oh, it's kitchen table issues. What about the shortage of baby formula? And it's like, you don't have kids. You don't care. Back to formula? That explains a lot of these young women in particular, but even the men as well, voting Democrat. They don't really care. They don't have a stake in the same manner that you believe. And you see these figures, even these have been more spread out in the past. Less than 50,000, 52% Democrat, 50 to 99, but still fairly even actually, pretty close. 100,000 or more, 46% are actually voting Democrat. And that was 37% overall. So you have to think about it, right? Because I know these people. I work around them. I've dated some of the women because unless you want a BBW max or go for single moms or find a trad wife, which is easier said than done, it's usually going to be these types of chicks. So profile. Middle class-ish, could be usually Caucasian, or they might be Caucasian assimilating. They graduated from college, 4-year degrees, some debt, but of course Uncle Joey helped bail them out. They are, they're probably working on a master's degree part-time online, and they work some job that's a variation of a bureaucracy, whether it's government, nonprofit, or potentially private sector, corporation. Because these bureaucracies always, they metastasize, mispronunciation. They expand out. They find ways to justify themselves. I think it was Bob Gates, his biography, was talking about a secretary would come into the DOD, and there would be all these teams designated to confuse the secretary, overburden him with meetings, with photo ops, with emails, to where he can't figure out what's going on or actually fix or reform the system. So you see this all over the place. They always create a new department, office, new titles for everyone. And it's a manner of basically make work. An increasingly larger number of folks are responsible for the same task, and no one can really be held accountable. But in the same way, this process gives people justification for their job and their existence. So if you're one of these people, you make, like, say, 50 to 70K, you put a little bit in your 401k, you have a very expensive apartment because you live in these little existence hubs that aren't quite suburbs, aren't quite city, but they have everything there you need: a theater, gyms, grocery stores, bars, your job in an office building. These people are not, oh, I'm trying to feed a bunch of kids, I'm making $15 an hour and commuting an hour for work. I have to fill up on gas, I have to pay for 5 different mouths. No, most of them, their concern is taking care of their dog if they have one. They go home and they plop down on the couch and they tell guys on Tinder that, oh, I'm so busy, I've got so much stuff going on, when in fact they're not, they're bored. These are the people who can be manipulated. They can be turned into TikTok sexuals. In other words, The right wing was typically about the individualism of, I don't need the government. Oh, I'm independent, more freedom, don't tread on me. The left wing equivalent is like this pathological narcissism of the individual seeking pleasure who never wants that interrupted, and also perpetual youth. So you don't see, okay, the next stage, I'm having a family, whatever. Naturally, everything's taken care of. You got your freshly dinners coming, you can microwave. You can call someone over to hook up if you need to. So you're going to get wrapped up in, oh yeah, my God, I can't kill babies. I need to vote for this. Or I've got to save the environment. These things that are meaningless for most people. It just gives them a cause. It's like I'm a superhero. But they're not at the level of deprivation that they are actually, oh my God, I'm actually at risk. So it's just the aspirational cause. And that's why they tend to vote Democrat in large numbers. And you're not going to win them over by talking about, oh yeah, inflation. It doesn't affect them in the same way. So it's two different worlds, if you will. This is the reason I thought that Dobbs ruling was disastrous. I mean, laying aside the political aspect, it was the conservatives trying to have their triumphant moment because they said, we're going back to the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, it's great. No, you see, you're missing the point. That you think giving consent to the governed, letting people vote for themselves solves the problem. It really doesn't. And you've seen the horrible, horrible outcome. Kansas, they rejected abortion restrictions. That's a pretty red state. Kentucky just rejected a amendment that would have prohibited abortion. Montana went against the necessity that you care for children that are survivors of abortion. Michigan overturned a prior law that was more restrictive on abortion. You have these blue states that are now codifying abortion. It might have been the case that overturning Roe v. Wade led to more abortion legalization, at least. And that's why they should have said, not that I necessarily agree with it, because I think from a realist standpoint, having no abortion could be a bad idea. But if you really believe it's wrong and unethical, you should have said across the board it's illegal nationwide, like the homosexual marriage ruling. Oh, but that's not conservative. Yes, but it would have really said something about this is one nation, we stand, and this is the principle. It's a question of character. But no, they ran away, and then they said, oh yeah, all these young normies are going to be able to make the right decision. Well, look at what they're doing. Not only are they going against what, the Republicans, but they're actually voting for more abortion. That's become their rallying cry. It's sad, and it just shows you either the GOP is going to have to wake up to stuff like, demographics, or they're going to have to turn around and probably moderatize and target these normies a little bit better. The whole thing of like, oh yeah, we can just kind of keep the same thing of we support tax cuts and we oppose abortion, that's not going to be a winning message. And I have to really emphasize this. Going into 2024, it's not enough to just say, oh, we can count on these groups. You're going to have to figure out these people that are they're on the internet all the time, but they're not like your type. So when before Bannon actually got involved in politics, one of his main business enterprise projects was in Japan. It was a company that would try to profit off of transactions selling items and characters in World of Warcraft. And that's where he got this idea of all these guys, these young men that are really into the game, and they spend a lot of time on the computer, and they can be potentially turned in a political direction, which they were very effectively. But that was Trump winning against a corrupt candidate when no one had any idea this stuff existed, when the internet was a lot more free range. And of course, Trump only won by a relatively slim margin. That's not going to work insofar as people are now aware, and you got these young people that are online, but it's all being channeled through TikTok in a different direction, which of course Trump said he was going to ban and just backed off. That's not going to work. Conservatism is going to have to be a lot more muscular, but also you're going to have to develop a vision for what you want to do that can appeal to these people as long as they have the voting power. Because I know you see the guys take away women's rights. Well, go ahead and do that. Form your American Taliban. But you know that most of these dudes are just LARPers sitting on the computer. Yeah, it's like when they say they're going to, oh, we should flee to Alaska because of Armageddon. Like, Alaska is one of the most dependent on the government. They have oil, true, but they import a lot of food. I guess, you could go live with the Eskimos. That might be a possibility. I'm trying to say that these elections, whether you want to blame fraud or not, which I'm not convinced so much it's the fraud that's decisive. I think it's the fact that yes, demographics matter a great deal, but also the message and the candidates you put out, and they're just not doing a good job of it. And so then they turn around, they try to like cannibalize each other, which sure, there is corruption from the GOP establishment on down, but you see the candidates that are being put up. You see the messages that are just all over the place, and you're surprised when these people can't win. And then you want to go to fraud, which maybe fraud happened, maybe it didn't. But again, it doesn't solve the underlying problem, which you don't have a message to run on, and you keep choosing lunatics to be your candidates. So I don't know what to make of it, but going forward, people have to start getting smart. Like you already see now this potential smackdown between Trump and DeSantis. That's another example of something that's not helpful. You have to unify if you want to win. If you break apart and then Trump's like, oh, I'm going to run by myself or what, it's just going to split your party more so, and it's going to make you completely unelectable, which that would be dangerous going into 2024. So let me know what you think. Are the Republicans going to actually win the Senate, or is it going to be status quo? And what do you think Kevin McCarthy is going to do as Speaker? Will he really reform everything? I have faith he will. He's going to totally overhaul the government, but I want to hear from you specifically. What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 years?